上周我们讲到 Brené Brown 所写的 Dare to Lead， 我们今天要延续这本书来介绍里面所提到的一个原则，那也希望帮助主管们能够更清楚地表达自己的期望。Hello， 欢迎来到 Executive Plus 主管与沟通力的 Podcast。I'm Sherry, an educator, certified coach, and style enthusiast。我相信专业有效的沟通是语言跟逻辑的完美结合。
And I'm Nick, a startup consultant, corporate trainer, and late-night gaming junkie. I believe great communication requires the right mindset and solid frameworks.
我们希望带给大家职场英语的技能、跨文化沟通技巧与其他能帮助您成为出色领导者的工具。
Join us each week as we share our experience, research, and methodologies to take your communication and language skills from good to great. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Executive Plus podcast. Today, we want to continue our exploration of Brené Brown's Dare to Lead. Specifically, one idea that she talks about quite a bit, which is how to handle task management and responsibility. And the fact that most of the time when we think that we're being clear, we're not. And most of the time that we think that we're saving someone's feelings or doing something that doesn't make someone feel questioned or untrusted, what we're actually doing is creating more of a problem than just being clear.
在这本书当中，他一直反复的提到一个 concept， 也就是 clear is kind。 那我第一次看到这个 concept 的时候，我就想说what does that really mean? What do you mean clear is kind? 我一直以为 kind 可能就是很有礼貌啊，然后你给对方很多的时间，给对方很多的 support, that's considered as kind。但是他一直提到 clear is kind， 那他接着就用很多的 example 来 support 那个原则。那我也发现自己有一些盲点，那希望今天也分享给所有的主管们，帮助大家能够去很清楚的解释自己的期望。
This becomes interesting from the concept of we often think clear is important, but we think clear is important as far as like task giving.
Yeah.
But a lot of times when we dial back on our own habits, we're often not clear because we don't want to create problems. We don't want to make someone feel like you are nagging them, or you don't want someone to feel like you're pushing them. But very often, most of your misunderstandings come when you're not clear, and then the miscommunication, and that's what creates tension, that's what creates problems. So starting with clarity is important. But along with clarity is being clear about where responsibility lies, which is if I give you a task and I'm clear about what that task is, then that person has to be willing to take full responsibility.
Right. And she had this example in the book, and I really resonate with that, is that she wanted her staff, let's say she ran the training, wanted her staff to collect a lot of testimonials and reviews so they can plan the next days. And then she's like, okay, just give me a good topic by 8 o'clock, 8 p.m. and just like stuff it in the door so I can take a look at my hotel room. And then by 8 o'clock, she got a list of like just piles and piles of documents from her staff. But in her head, she's thinking that this needs to be organized chronologically or by names and needs to be organized in a very specific way. But she never really explained it. And to me, it's like, I must have done that before. Like to my head, you know, when I want something, I'm just like, oh, okay, yeah, give this to me. And a lot of times I didn't want to be very specific because I didn't want it to sound bitchy. I feel like if I tell them, oh, you need to do this and that and put it this way and that sounds so bossy. Like I didn't want it to sound like that. And that's the downfall. So you would ended up getting a lot of these assignment or tasks given to you that you needed them to work on it again or rework again. So yeah, it just, to me, it's like a very classic example, but must have happened a lot.
And this is where some of that bitterness comes from the other side, when you have to go back and be like, well, this is not actually what I expected, do it again. And then they'll be thinking, but I already finished, or I followed your instructions. I don't know what's in your head. And so this is where a lot of that tension starts coming in again, because it's not that they can't do it. It's that because you weren't clear in the first place, now they feel like they're getting extra work.
Yeah. And that's when they feel like, but you didn't explain to me, and now you're telling me I'm not doing enough. And that's gonna be when a lot of staff feels really unhappy, or they don't feel accomplished because they've done the work but didn't get like a kudos from the boss.
And I think, as you said, for most people, if you reflect back on a lot of past management, especially new management, there's a good chance everyone does it. In fact, it's a guarantee that everyone has done this. I would say especially new managers, because they're sometimes uncomfortable in that position where it's like, these used to be your colleagues. Now you are their manager, or maybe you're new to that company. So you don't want to come in, just start swinging a bat and hitting everybody with what your requirements are. So you try and be more tactful. But this is where, again, now it just becomes, are you the manager that is not organized and doesn't tell people what you want? Or are you the manager that makes people work overtime because they couldn't accomplish it the way you want? A lot of this, from Brene Brown's perspective, can be fixed just with being clear. Part of that clarity is you actually need to plan ahead of time. But then when you know what you want in your head, you have to talk to your team very specifically about what that is.
Right. So in the book, she actually talked about several techniques that she's using. First of all, she used this technique called task. So TASC. So T means who owns the task. A means do they have the authority to be held accountable. S, do we agree that they are set up for success, meaning enough time, resource, clarity. And C, do we have a checklist of what needs to happen to accomplish the task?
And so these are really like questions that the manager should be asking in their head, or even outlining very specifically so that all the pieces are on the table. And specifically for me, that second letter, A, do they have the authority to be held accountable? This becomes really important in terms of a lot of times managers, or especially like upper management, will expect something to be done, but they will not give someone the authority to make that decision. They'll be like, I need you to get all these things done. But then the reality is the person who has to make the decision, or the person who has to even make the phone call or decide that that can be a direction that you go, is not the person it gets assigned to. So now that person has to come back constantly and ask questions. And so really making sure that someone has the authority and they are ready for the accountability.
Right. And this is where I see, 有很多的 manager 他们可能是所谓的那种 micro manager。这个时候 micro manager 其实无法提供这种 authority 给任何的人。So I think this is where they kind of fail to be a better manager when it comes to this.
This is where you'll see micromanaging managers will become a bottleneck for an organization, because they will give, like, it doesn't matter how many people on their team. There could be 15, 20 people on their team that all have tasks. But if that person can only get to a certain stage and then they cannot go forward without asking the manager for permission to go forward or having everything double checked, then that manager bottlenecks everything. If they've trained their team right and they're bringing good work and they can just go, okay, yes, I like this, or change this direction, or again, they can be clear on what their expectations is. Yeah, it's good for a manager to double check work, make sure everything is in line because they have the big picture. But when it's a person who's just like, okay, before you email that to anyone, you have to give it to me every time. Now, extend that by 5 or 10 people. That means the manager is actually just an email authority. And that's it. Like, they're not doing anything else.
Absolutely. And I love this other thing that she borrowed from Scrum. I think a lot of people know what that is. But basically, what Scrum really explains, one thing is really important, is that always ask, what does done look like? So ask yourself, what does done look like before you give out a task? Or have your employee ask you that question.
Yeah, and I'm sure other people in the company will agree that I do this all the time, where I have a very specific idea in my head. And to me, that is logical or that makes sense. But then when I go, okay, I want you to do this thing. And then even I feel I'm being a bit more detail oriented of like, this is what should be there. Sometimes that's not done. That's my version of done. And I maybe skip over details or I am not clear about all the pieces. So done has to be both clear to the manager, but especially even if the manager knows what that looks like, they may have to even what they think is over-explain what done really looks like until they know that there's a synergy with their team.
And actually, this makes me think about, how we talked about social styles before. 我在想说，是不是某一类型的主管会比较不会有这样子的一个盲点？ So for me, as an expressive, I especially have to ask myself this question. 因为我的 done 可能完全都是在我的脑子，因为我一边讲一边想，所以当我讲完的时候，我可能已经想了1000个东西了，但是这1000个东西我并没有办法可能没有办法马上变得很清楚。For me, if I ask myself this question, it's like a reorganizing information in my head, which really helps me. And yeah, this is a good reminder. But I don't know, what about driver?
Yeah, driver, it's back to done for a driver is complete in their head. But drivers tend to just give key information. So when they're explaining done, they're probably just like, you need A, B, and C. But the details of what comprises A, unless someone asks, the driver may just assume, well, that's pretty intuitive, right? You should just know that. The only style who is very likely to truly explain done is analytical.
Right.
And analytical, if you ask them, they will give you done. But the trade-off of that is they may not organize it in a way that's very actionable. They will just describe as a whole. And amiable would be even harder because an amiable would be like, what do you think done is?
Yeah.
Right?
What do you think? How do you feel? Again, like amiable 通常是比较所谓的 people pleaser. 那我自己也有点这样子的 traits. 所以像我啦，我很清楚知道自己的一个盲点就是我脑海里面所想的东西跟我嘴巴讲出来的东西通常会有点不一样，因为我嘴巴讲出来的东西会加上我们所谓的 downgrader. So again, this goes back to what Brene Brown was talking about is that clear is kind. So, but actually I was being unclear. I thought being unclear is kinder. So I really have to reprogram my head and hopefully I can be very, very clear in the future.
And part of this clarity comes back to that acronym, TASK. So Brene Brown even advocates that within your meeting minutes or within recording what kind of tasks need to be done, you need to cover all these pieces.
Yeah.
So it's not just a matter of like, okay, everyone understands what needs to get done. Sherry, this is now your task. Everyone move on. But actually, either within the meeting minutes or within the discussion, these things need to be clarified. Okay, I know who owns the task. I have to decide what authority do they have, and if they don't typically have that authority, I probably need to give them permission to make these decisions. In fact, in another model, Apple's DRI, directly responsible individual, when someone is given DRI, they have full authority to make decisions, and they don't even need to explain those decisions. They just go and make them. So that's one way to give someone authority. S, are they set up for success? And this is back to what does done look like?
Yeah.
I need to know, do they have enough time? Do they have all the right resources? Are we clear about what the painting done is? And then finally, do we have a checklist as part of that painting done?
Yeah.
So how do I know? Did I hit all the major steps? Did I check all the boxes? If I don't know what done looks like, it's very hard to decide what that checklist is.
Right. And I think once you figure it out in your head, what does done look like, and you can verbally explain it to your team, to your staff, then the S and C part is pretty clear.
We hope you enjoyed this dive into Brene Brown's thoughts on the task method. Again, when thinking about how to be clear about a task, how to assign responsibility, clarity is kindness. Understanding every step. And that clarity can both be within yourself, but then more importantly, communicating with a clear tone, with a clear message of what needs to get done and what is your expectation I've done. We'll talk to you guys next time.
Bye.
Bye.
The Executive Plus podcast is a Presentality Group production, produced and hosted by Sherry Fang and Nick Howard. You can search us on Facebook, 主管英文 Executive Plus. You can also find us on Instagram, Communication R&D, and email us at sherry@epstyleplus.com.